This month, in October 2020, Linkin Park's phenomenon of a debut record, Hybrid Theory, turns 20 years old. Despite it making me feel positively ancient, I feel that this milestone is cause for celebration, rather than lamenting my lost and mostly wasted youth. Let's instead celebrate this whopper of a record that guided our generation through our angst and nihilism by taking a deeper look into its themes and motifs. Is it more layered than just the raw teenage anger I remember it being? I'm Rustin Charmaine, and this is Exploring the Concept. This record, coming out in late 2000, marks the last hurrah in the rap metal nu metal boom period of the late 90s. By this time, the scene was becoming a touch overcrowded, and the edgy, in-your-face acts that initially propelled the genre were beginning to feel a little tame. By the time Crazy Town managed to score a #1 hit with what was essentially a Red Hot Chili Peppers remix, the jig was up. The times were changing. Nickelback were about to explode. It wasn't a particularly good time for music with guitars in it, the ramifications of which we still feel today. But rap metal had one more gem to share with us. A record chocked full to the brim of barn-burning singles and incredible deep cuts. Without further ado, let's take a look inside Hybrid Theory. Papercut opens the album with a snippet of what we can expect from the record musically, as any good album opener should. Calm, picked riff, record scratches, crunching main riff from nowhere. This is Hybrid Theory. The first verse from Mike speaks of something I've been all too familiar with in my life. Negative voices within one's own self, nagging and pulling at any positivity I manage to feel and find. In order to attempt to combat this negativity, we will often seek to personify it. Referring to it as a face is Mike's method of doing that. Personally, I refer to mine as a word that I don't want to say in this video in case it gets age-gated. It begins with a C. In our darkest times, we seek light in whatever form we can find. That might be in the love of another, a passionate hobby, a new career. Should this crutch fall away, it can feel like the light is being robbed from you, or turning its back on you when you needed it the most. The meanings behind this belter are far less open to interpretation, as they've been clearly defined in an interview Chester gave to Kerrang back in 2011. When we were recording it, Don Gilmore was really drilling me and Mike about lyrics, and it had gotten to the point where we'd rewritten some songs 30 times. I remember walking into the control room, handing Don the lyrics, and he grabbed them, passed them in front of his face without even looking, handed them back to me and told me to do it again. I lost my effing mind, thinking this guy's an effing maniac. But that kind of inspired the lyrics. I cannot take this anymore, I'm saying everything I've said before, all these words make no sense, and the chorus, everything you say to me takes me one step closer to the edge. It all came from that frustration, so I guess in the end he inspired me the way he wanted to. Yep, makes sense. Yeah, I think we've all had a boss or colleague whose face we'd love to scream in before, have we not? Classic wish fulfillment. This song kind of speaks for itself in that regard. On to the next one. This song screams of the loss of a loved one, perhaps a loved one who you may not have always seen eye to eye with. This could be viewed as a breakup track, but for me it feels more like the lamenting of a fallen brother or sister, someone who you had your fallings out with and never quite managed to patch them up before they left for good.
Forfeit the game before somebody else takes you out of the frame and put your name to shame, cover up your face. You can't run the race, the pace is too fast, it just won't last.
This is a threat. Mike is telling a so far unknown person to quit what they're doing before somebody shames them and or punishes them for what they're doing. Chester then directs this threat at its intended target, an abuser who gains pleasure from inflicting pain upon the protagonist. If you know anything about Chester's life story, particularly his troubled youth, it becomes fairly obvious who this anger is directed towards. The chorus preaches a sense of ownership over the tribulations that occur in our lives. By sharing our pain with others, we see that we are not alone in our trauma and that we can learn from the experience of it, even if it does leave us permanently damaged in some ways. Opening with its short chorus, Crawling immediately surmises its themes of drug dependence and the mental state that leads to relapse. The protagonist of the song is painfully aware of his addiction and how he cannot seem to shake his need for chemical alterations. He doesn't have enough self-esteem or pride within him to allow him to find a comfort in himself without the need for drugs. The protagonist is having his eyes open to the fact that someone he trusted has been lying to him, potentially for many years. This is the most teen angst heavy track on the record and therefore, unfortunately, one I don't really relate to as much anymore. This is a longing for exploring independence and discovering the world for one's self, rather than relying on the words and teachings of others. The protagonist of this song is plagued with doubts regarding his own self and actions, most likely indicating a rather severe case of anxiety. One of my favourite things about this song is that the chorus and the title lyric are a little misleading at surface value. It doesn't mean being alone. By myself refers instead to the protagonist's awareness that his issues are self-inflicted. He's chastising himself for his own perceived inadequacies, indecisiveness and trust issues. He gets hurt by himself.
I've lost so much. So afraid. I'm out of touch. How do you expect I will know what to do when all I know is what you tell me to?
At this point in the song, we realise that the lyrics do not follow the protagonist in a monologue, but are rather a speech being made to someone else, possibly a therapist, but more likely a partner or other significant loved one. He speaks in first person terms, I can't hold on, I'm stretched too thin, and then switches to second person for the end of the song after his initial diatribe is completed and he wants to address his listener. This song tells a story and an attempted explanation of severe anxiety and how abysmally those conversations tend to go. A tough listen for many of us.
Watch the time go right out the window. Trying to hold on to didn't even know or wasted it all just to watch you go. I kept everything inside and even though I tried, it all fell apart.
This is a lamentation of failure, an acknowledgement that keeping one's feelings hidden and allowing time to just slip by can cause a relationship to fall apart, and for once strong love to dwindle.
Things aren't the way they were before. You wouldn't even recognize me anymore. Not that you knew me back then, but it all comes back to me in the end. You kept everything.
Time apart, whether literally or figuratively, can cause people once close to each other to both change beyond recognition, consigning any previous positive feelings to the past, and bringing forth resentment and questioning whether the love was ever truly there. A sense of existential nihilism. Why bother trying at all if this is where it was going to end up?
Watch how the moon sits in the sky on a dark night, shining with the light from the sun. The sun doesn't give light to the moon, assuming the moon's gonna owe it one. It makes
A Place for My Head opens with quite possibly the best lyric on the album. It would be even better if Mike's next bar wasn't spent explicitly spelling out what it means, but never mind. This song seeks to escape from people who only want you around so that they can get something from you. Longing to be surrounded by people who understand and relate to us, rather than those who fail to comprehend our mental states and how we feel. People like this need kicking to the curb. Surround yourself with positive people who like you for who you are. The blood of the covenant is thicker than the water of the womb.
Acidic questions, forcefully, the power of suggestion. Then with the eyes shut, looking through the rust and rotten dust, a small spot of light floods the floor and pours over the rusted world of pretend. And the eyes ease open and it's dark again.
This verse speaks of toxic dreams, worries and anxieties falling like acid rain, leading the protagonist down a path he doesn't want to go down. Thankfully, he recognizes that he is dreaming and manages to wake, only to find more darkness. Sleep only brings dreams of sadness for the protagonist, held in his sorrow until morning comes and he wakes. Again here I have to say, the record's tendency to begin songs in first person and switch to second is a little jarring. I can only imagine that the person involved in creating the bad memory from which these nightmares have sprung is the target for these lines, possibly the same person from Points of Authority.
Folks, we have a very special guest for you tonight. I'd like to introduce...
Yeah, this is an instrumental track by Joe Hahn. Not a whole lot for me to break down here lyrically. It does act as a respite from the heavy tracks and themes that came before it, but I do question its placement as the penultimate song on the album. As a track, I rate it. Joe's instrumentals are always at least solid, but it doesn't hold a candle to a solo sample he provides on a certain future record. And so the record comes to a close with Pushing Me Away, a track framed by its opening lyric of admitting fault in the failing of a relationship. Pretending to be happy and content in order to protect others rarely, if ever, works, and usually does more harm than good. The protagonist questions why he ever bothered to delude himself into believing that this relationship could lead to happiness for either party, when it clearly wouldn't. He recognises also that his lover saw his hesitance and has been attempting to coax it out of him, only causing further separation. Lyrically, thematically, this album stays very close to home and flows pretty much how I remember it doing, tackling heavy, subjective mental issues in short, forceful songs. There's a reason why so many of us connected with its images and themes in our troublesome teens. But I would struggle to argue that the lyrical concepts are what made this album great, or what continues to bring people back to it. The longest track on this record is 3 minutes and 36 seconds. The shortest track is 2 minutes and 37. Every single track on this record is on or around the 3-minute mark. All of them hit hard with dynamic motions between well-crafted verses, bridges and choruses. This album goes just under 40 minutes and the time flies by. It picks up a rhythm and doesn't drop it until the very end. That's what will continue attracting people to this record for another 20 years. I've been Royston Charmaine, this has been Exploring the Concept, and I'll see you in 3 years for Meteora, which is a far better album than this one. Yeah, I said it, fight me.